All right, personality continues. This is the fourth video. This is reading pages 493 to 503, and this is going to be your trait perspective notes. Big people you need to pay attention to in this one is Gordon Allport. We're going to talk about Myers and Briggs, Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs, Hans and Sybil Eisnick, Raymond Cattell. We'll talk about the Big Five, which is a personality test that is commonly used today. Then we'll kind of talk about all these people, and we'll assess, or we'll look at how they actually test the trait perspective. And then lastly, we'll evaluate the trait. Do you think that this is a good perspective, bad perspective, kind of what we've been doing with every single approach so far. So, trait perspective. The last two videos we've watched, the humanistic and the psychodynamic, both were trying to explain why we have the behavior we do. Okay? Rather than understand why we have the personality we do, the trait perspective explores what is the makeup of someone's personality. Okay, so you can say that I am a very excited person and very organized. Okay? Humanistic and psychodynamic, we're trying to explore why is that I have that. Right? Was it because of my childhood? Was it because of the order in which I was born? Trait perspective just looks at the what. What are the characteristics that make up me? Organized and maybe happy or gullible. Okay. So in general, a trait is a characteristics of behavior or disposition to feel or act as assessed by self-reported inventories or peer reports. So it's a characteristics of behavior or a disposition. Okay, so an example of a trait could be hardworking, organized. Don't think physical traits like red hair. Okay, this is looking at more your personality. Okay, trait theories of personality. Okay, theorists believe that we can describe people's personality by specifying their main characteristics or their traits. Traits are things like honesty, laziness, ambition, outgoing, are thought to be stable over the course of your life. Okay, so if I'm somebody that's organized, I'm not all of a sudden going to be somebody who's disorganized by the time I'm 52. All right. Somebody who looked at this is kind of what I just went through. You're going to know Gordon Allport, Isabel Briggs Myers, Catherine Myers, Hans Isaac, and Sybil Eisnick, and Raymond Cattell are all important people, and you should know that the theories they're responsible for. Costa and McCree are additional names you should pay attention to. Okay, so the English dictionary has 18,000 traits you could use to describe someone's personality. The big argument is how many dimensions should we have? Many researchers state that we should use factor analysis, which is a statistical procedure that chunks similar qualities together. Okay. You're either outgoing, energetic, excitement-seeking. You can all have that as the same category because the characteristics are very similar. Okay? Other people argue, no, outgoing is very different from energetic. You need to have two separate categories. Right? So there are 18,000 traits. The big debate here with this theory is how many traits describe a person. Okay? Should we have 5? Should we have 4? Should we have 8? Are there just cardinal, dominant traits? Okay, and so that is the huge argument with this trait. Factor analysis. Factor analysis is then, let's say they decide to cluster very similar traits together. So energetic, outgoing, okay, are clustered in an area together. Okay, and then you would get a score. So it's a statistical procedure that's used to identify different components of your intelligence we talked about before, or personality. Okay, so with intelligence, they used to chunk areas that were similar together, like general intelligence, right? They may chunk something like your reading score together along with your, let's say, your English score, since they're pretty similar. They may chunk that together and to get your evaluation or your score of it. The factor analysis takes the answers you give on a test and compiles them into general traits. Okay, so the first person I'll look at is Gordon Allport. He is the founder of the trait perspective. So if you had to look at the psychoanalytical perspective, that was Sigmund Freud. Gordon Allport is responsible for trait. He believed people have certain identifiable patterns of behavior. Okay, he actually interviewed Freud and did some research on Freud. He was really interested about what about the conscious mind is intriguing, and are they digging too deep? So he was kind of criticizing Freud for a while. Why are they doing that? He believed that every single person is made up with a cardinal trait and 4 or 5 central traits. So a cardinal trait is everyone has one dominating trait. This trait is very apparent and dominates all. So if I were to give you somebody, like let's say I gave you Michael Jordan or I gave you Derrick Rose. Okay, the first thing, if I gave you Derrick Rose, the first thing that might pop into your head is athletic. Right? That might be his cardinal trait, the one thing that everybody kind of assumes or associates him with. 4 or 5 other traits would be other traits that he can identify with. So hardworking, dedicated, somebody who has a good sense of humor, organized, so forth. So your cardinal trait is the number 1 trait that most people affiliate you with, and then central traits are 4 or 5 other traits. All right, so now moving on to Myers-Briggs is a very popular personality evaluation tool. Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs were a mother and daughter team that came up with this trait approach. The test looks at 4 dominating personality traits, and then you fall on one side of the scale or another. 2 million people take this test a year. Okay, and it's not so much... it's known as a type indicator, meaning that you're either one or the other. Okay, so you're an extrovert or you're an introvert. All right, it's not giving you another test that we'll look at, which is the extrovert. Extrovert, or the other score we're going to look at is Canoe, and they may give you a percentage of how much trait you actually have of that. Okay, extrovert is you're either one or the other. Okay, this test is also known as the MBTI test. So the 8 different areas that you can fall in are either you're an extrovert or you're an introvert. You either have sensing abilities or you have intuition. You're a thinker or you're a feeler, and you're a good judgment maker or you're more into perceiving things. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through all the different categories. Okay. Hans Eysenck he believed in that we have 2 different axes, and the 4 different traits he kind of looked at was you're either introverted or extroverted, okay, and you're either stable or unstable. So stable emotionally or unstable, right? And then you could fall into the 4 different areas. So they believed that our biological and our temperament influences us. So we're born essentially with some of our personality traits, our temperament. So let's say I'm in the extroverted area, okay, which is all the way over to the right. All right. And let's say I also feel like I have qualities of stability. So I would probably be in the lower right side of the screen. I'm very sociable, outgoing, talkative, responsive, easygoing, lively, carefree, and I have leadership abilities. Those are probably traits that describe me if I was assuming myself as an extrovert and somebody who was emotionally stable. Raymond Cattell, he didn't believe that we have just, the last one we looked at, there was basically just 2 traits you have. You're either one or the other. This one believed we have 16 different personality traits. And they're listed on here in terms of, are you somebody who's empathetic or not, enthusiastic, conscientious, sociable, not, suspicious. You do not need to know all the different traits in which you could be under this category, but you need to know that Raymond Cattell is another person who came up with another theory that said we have 16 dominating traits. The Big Five is another one we're going to spend some time looking at. It came up by Costa and McCree. They believed many trait theories came to an agreement that people had 5 dominant areas. So it came to a point where 16, 4, 8, 10, how many traits does an individual really have, and what are they? This is the most researched theory since the 1990s, and they believe you have the Big Five. And it's going to give you a score on how much of that trait you actually exhibit. So you can be scored 1 through 100 in terms of your conscientious ability. Conscientious, agreeable, neurotic, open, extroversion. Notice that that spells canoe if you go down, C-A-N-O-E. That's a tool to help you remember all the different components. All right, so the Big Five, according to the Big Five trait theory, your traits are stable over time. They can be attributed to your genetics. 50% or more surveyed are similar to their parents. They describe personality equality well across different cultures. They saw the same personality traits among many different places. So here's the breakdown of canoe for you. Okay, you really need to know what the terms represent, the definition, and some terms that go around or associate with it. So conscientious, are you dependable, reliable? You're somebody who's you like to keep order, you're cautious, you're somebody who's dutiful, you get the job done, you're self-disciplined, you're responsible, or you may exhibit a little bit of less of this area where you're careless, you're irresponsible, okay, is the opposite end of this area. Agreeable, how well you get along with people. Are you trusting? Are you helpful? Are you cooperative? Okay, are you sympathetic? Okay, are you modest? Or are you unhelpful, non-trusting, suspicious of individuals? Neurotic. A lot of students struggle with this word. Neurotic means how emotionally stable are you? Are you somebody who's constantly anxious, depressed, angry, you have anxiety, you're vulnerable, you're unsecure? Or are you somebody who's very secure in who they are, they're calm, right? They're patient, right? In terms of how well they kind of fit this category. Open, how well are you willing to try new experiences? So are you imaginative? Are you artistic, adventurous? Do you like variety? Or are you somebody who's pretty conservative? You like routine. Okay, you're not somebody who's going to go jump out of a plane tomorrow. If you look at your teacher, she's probably falling on the spectrum of somebody. Ms. Gavin's probably pretty routine. She doesn't necessarily like change. And Ms. D, however, might be a little bit more imaginative. She likes to be more adventurous on this spectrum. Extroversion is how outgoing you are. So do you like working in groups? Are you friendly? Are you assertive? You like to get the task done? Are you somebody who's very affectionate? You're fun-loving, you're cheerful? Or are you a little bit more serious and self-reserved and somebody who likes to kind of keep your thoughts to yourself? Being one thing or another is not a good or bad thing. Okay, it's just describing the personality in which you have. And like I said, we will be taking a personality test in class, so you'll be able to see where you fall in the Big Five area. So you need to know what each of the different terms means so when you can understand your score. Okay, here's another pretty good visual of the Big Five. Again, canoe. It gives you on the spectrum, you could either be organized or not. And where do you kind of fall? Careful, careless, disciplined, impulsive. So here's additional terms that might help with the arrows when you're trying to understand the differences between them. Okay, so assessing our traits. So we talked about testing the psychoanalytical perspective with the thematic apperception test and the inkblots. Let's talk about how we assess the trait perspective. You're going to take personality tests or inventories. It's a questionnaire where people respond to items attempting to gauge different aspects about their personality. You often either agree or disagree or true or false. Examples of personality inventories are the Myers-Briggs, which we will take in class. We'll also be taking the Big Five, so you'll kind of see how these work. The Minnesota Molastic Personality Inventory is another highly used test that you may take one point in your career. So the Minnesota Molastic Personality Inventory, MMPI, is the most widely used research personality test, and it's clinically used It's more clinically used for more personality tests and originally developed to identify emotional disorders. So is there somebody emotionally unstable, looking at the neurotic area, and still considered its most appropriate use. So a lot of the times they use it for emotionally, people who have emotional problems. Two people that kind of looked at it was Stark Hathaway was somebody who looked at it. And then today it's used for a lot of screening purposes. So if you ever become a police officer, fireman, you may take a personality test because they're going to want somebody who is calm and reserved and somebody who's not going to be full of anxiety and anxious in terms of how they respond to stuff. Okay, so here's an example of some of the questions that may be asked. I like mechanic magazines. I have a good appetite. I wake up fresh and rested most mornings. So saying yes to that might say that you have a positive attitude, that you're somebody who is not so anxious, or somebody who is very calm in how they are able to get rest. Somebody who's anxious and doesn't sleep well can kind of show that they're moody or angry. You're somebody who's easily awakened by a noise. Again, that might show that anxiety, that fear, versus somebody who is very calm. No, it doesn't bother them. So here are some questions that you may see true or false on the different tests that we're going to be taking in the next couple days. Okay, so continuing with the trait theory, once you take a survey, then they get the data back, and it's empirically derived data, which is the test developed by evaluating a pool of items, conscientious, carefree, and then you select those that discriminate from the group. So I'm more careless than I am carefree. Okay. Then you get your score. Usually it's scored against another population. So mine is kind of an evaluation of other people who are my age and my gender. It's scored objectively, meaning that there are, like, you could be one thing or another. It's a lot of times graded by computers after you take it, and it'll spit you out a score. However, it's not always valid, because you may take this test today and say one thing and take it tomorrow and be in a positive mood and say something else. You can lie because you want to fit into society's needs. Okay, so just because you're taking this test, it's a survey. We talked about this before. Surveys aren't always giving you the best answers. Evaluating the trait perspective, the person's situation controversy. Although people's traits persist over time, there are behaviors that vary from situation to situation. What this means is I might be somebody who's really outgoing and happy and excited and motivated and organized here at work because of the situation I'm put in. And then when I get home, I'm a totally different person. Okay, one's personality at school versus one's personality with friends may be a little bit different. Despite these variations, a person's average behavior across different situations tends to be very consistent. Okay, so even though you may be somebody who in class is an introvert, with your friends you may be a little bit more social, but again, you're falling closer to the introvert side of the scale. You're not going to all of a sudden be the most extrovert person you've ever met in your life. Okay. Person, situation, controversy. So our traits really stable over time. Okay, you have somebody who's tough, angry at their job or their workplace, and then when they get with their family, they're very kind. Kind of what I talked about before. And then evaluating it, why is it good, why is it bad? Positive, people can get a snapshot of their personality if they're truthful on the survey, so I can kind of gauge where I'm at. Negative, people can lie on surveys, and it doesn't explain, we kind of got back started with the beginning, why I have the personality I do. It's great that I'm caring and outgoing, but why am I that way? This one perspective is not going to explain that.